Hi, everyone, and welcome to the QuitCast. My name is Becca. We are in the middle of our Intuitive Authors series, and today we're going to talk about something that is very important in understanding how intuition processes data and how we understand both the world and the external world and also our internal world. And that is the difference between certainty and correctness. So certainty means I'm sure of something. I'm certain of something. And you can hear when you're an intuitive person, especially if you are either emotionally or spiritually intuitive, you can hear how certain someone is when they're talking. And you might be reading body language, you might be listening to the actual auditory sounds of their voices, however it is their mannerisms, but you are able, most intuitives, to sense how certain someone is when they're talking. You may not be conscious that you do this, but you are able to sense that by, again, the core of intuition is that massive amount of data reading that happens very, very quickly, almost blink of an eye fast, and usually unconsciously or subconsciously. So most of the time, our intuition is taking in information that we're not even aware of, and it's creating data points on a graph, and it's filling in the missing pieces between those data points. So when I'm hearing someone's tone of voice, or if I'm hearing where they put emphasis in their syllables when they're talking, whatever it is that I'm actually hearing, my brain or my heart are understanding the meaning to be, I am sure about what I'm talking about. My assumption is that most people you listen to who deliver talks, most people who are on podcasts or have YouTube channels are certain about what they're talking about. If you ever watch things like, if you ever watch TikTok, if you ever watch Reels on Instagram, like you have that sense that whoever's talking has some authority, that they're certain about what they're talking about. The way that our human brains, maybe it's a lizard brain thing, I don't know. I would assume that some of it is biological, but the way that our human brains want to process certainty is that we want certainty to be directly related to correctness. This is the way that we feel the most comfortable. So that when someone is extremely certain, that they are also extremely correct. Like that is the way that our brain makes assumptions. And this is humans, not just intuitives, but everyone does this on some level. There is that feeling of, if they are that certain, then they believe they are correct, and then they must be correct. And we're making those assumptions as we listen. Part of the problem is that as an intuitive, you're measuring your own certainty against their certainty. So if someone is telling you how to change a washer on a sink and you've never done that before, and you hear the certainty that they're delivering these steps in, you feel more comfortable listening to them because they're giving you advice about how to change this thing on your sink. I don't even know if it's called a washer. Who knows? I just pulled that out of the air. But the which is hilarious because I was trying to come up with an example that wasn't writing related, quote unquote, because I feel like I always use writing related examples, but and those are more nebulous, and we'll get to that in a second. But if someone's telling you how to change the washer on your sink or the washer on your faucet, maybe, and they're explaining it to you and they give you these step-by-step directions and they're speaking very certainly, you're following the directions, assuming that they know what they're talking about because you hear the way that they're delivering or see them or feel them the way that they feel certain. You feel an uncertainty in you. You do not know how to do this, which is why you're seeking out the YouTube video or the friend to help you or the book or whatever. And so that certainty helps you to feel comfortable listening to them. So the important piece here is that we feel like correctness and certainty are directly caused by each other. So we subconsciously believe, and again, this is not something you would consciously say, but we subconsciously believe that the more certain someone sounds, the more correct they are. And I don't mean insistent when I say certain, because I think those of you who are in the Strengths Finder who are high empathy, in other tests, if you test as high intuitive or high feeling, things like that, you can have a sense that someone is too insistent. And that's actually maybe a red flag, because then you feel like you're trying, like they're trying to sell you something, or they're trying to get you to believe something or whatever. So insistence is not what I mean. I mean certain. If I'm telling you the sky is blue and I'm looking at the sky, and you trust how certain I am, and you trust that I don't have a motivation for telling you that, then you believe me, right? Because, well, and of course you can see it yourself, although not everybody's sky is blue today. But the certainty and the correctness, we want them to be directly related to each other. So we want there to be a causal relationship between how certain and how correct you are, which means that the correctness causes the certainty, right? So if I am teaching you how to change a washer on your faucet, which I do think is actually right. Now I want to go look it up. But if I'm teaching you how to do that, you're assuming that I've done it enough and that the process itself is replicatable, that that certainty means that I am correct. And I would also generally assume that about people who are teaching you how to do things that they have done themselves over and over again. The danger, and again, like this is the it depends moment, right? The danger is that depending on what they are certain about and how they think that certainty should apply to you, they can actually be incorrect about something without realizing it. And then you get more of an XY axis experience where the correctness and the certainty are not directly related to each other. They're not parallel. They're not causal. They're only correlated. So you can be completely incorrect and also completely certain at the same time. And you will sound the same to an intuitive person as someone who is both correct and certain. And this is one of the difficulties, I think, in being an intuitive person, is that you often mistrust how you feel yourself. You mistrust the knowledge that you have about you and how you're wired and what should and shouldn't happen in your life and where your priorities should be. And you hear someone else giving you their interpretation, which doesn't sound like their interpretation. It sounds like certainty about what should be happening in your platform or career or writing. Just as an example, the one that I see happen the most often in writing groups is the right to market, right? So you have this certainty of, and again, this is not anti-right to market. It works for some people, but it doesn't work for some people. But there's this certainty that people who have succeeded at it deliver this maxim of thou shalt right to market as though it is unassailable, right? As though the certainty and the correctness are so intertwined and so causal that if you're not writing to market, there's something wrong with you. And I've actually seen these things be said in author groups, like you're not taking it seriously if you're not writing to market, or you're doing it wrong if you're not writing to market, et cetera, which again, I know we question the premise a lot around here, but the core of this particular concept about intuition is that you are uncertain first, right? Like as an intuitive, most of the time we question ourselves first instead of questioning other people. And this is literally why we developed the QTP method, is because when you know that your first instinct is to mistrust your own instinct, which is the ultimate irony, because so often the instincts are correct. Intuitive instincts are correct, but no matter how many times we prove that our instincts are correct in the past, we still question them because we don't know for sure that it's going to work every time. And this is sort of the core of intuition, is that because every situation is a little bit different, the intuitive has a harder time convincing themselves that their instinct is correct about something because they have not yet been proven to be correct. And that's usually how intuition happens. I have a feeling about something, I just know something, and then eventually I am proven correct about that thing. And so I know that sometimes I'm proven incorrect, even if it's only 2 or 3% of the time. And because, like, when we talk about strategics, we say it's common for strategics to be wrong very little, like, be very, very rare that a strategic will be wrong about something. But when they are, it feels like such a big deal because it's an anomaly for strategics, and not that it never happens, but that it does rarely happen. And so a strategic might have that sense of like, what if this is the time that I'm wrong and I want to wait to be proven certain about something? And so often that uncertainty that we feel about the fact that we can't prove exactly what is going on is what causes us to mistrust our own intuition and to feel that uncertainty. So when I feel how uncertain I feel, right? It feels very visceral to me. And because the certainty of the other person feels so strong and so big, then I compare it with my own, and I think, well, they must know exactly what they're talking about and it must be correct because they're so certain. And therefore, I'm going to do what they say, or I'm going to question my own instinct. And the core of understanding that inverse relationship between certainty and correctness is knowing that how certain someone is not relevant to how correct they are, because they can believe something is absolutely true and it can also be right for them, and they can also have experienced the rightness in the past, and it can still be wrong for you, and your instinct can still be correct. And I know we use the plotting versus pantsing, and not every single intuitive writer is a pantser. In fact, some of you who are high intuitive have contacted me and said, am I doing it wrong as an intuitive because I'm a plotter and not a pantser? And then we walk through why they're plotting. And it's not about fear and trauma, which sometimes it is, right? Sometimes it's about fear and trauma, but it's not about that. It's about another personality trait that they have that's causing that plotting to work for them. And so what I always say is it has to be on an individual basis. We have to figure this out. But additionally, if we don't allow ourselves to question the premise when someone else is extremely certain about something, then we're going to constantly be derailing ourselves in expecting that we have to do something in a way just because the person who's talking is certain about it. And again, the problem is there are so many variables in each situation about whether or not it's going to work for you, whether or not the particular thing they're suggesting is going to work for you. But because they're so certain about it, we immediately feel that, oh, well, that must be the answer, so I have to do that. It's one of the reasons that I have a really hard time uh, being 100% about anything and saying, like, this is absolutely the way it is for everyone, even when it applies to like 80+% of people, because that 20% of people, if they struggle with this certainty paradox, the correctness and certainty paradox, then they're going to end up questioning themselves, because I said so, right? Like the pantsing situation where I say most intuitives are some form of discovery writer. And then the 20% of intuitives who plot feel like they're doing it wrong. And then Becca always has to caveat and say, there are reasons why you might be plotting that are personality related, that are working for you, that are success patterns. And so we want to not touch that. And what you'll see is there will be a pattern in your history of how effective the process is for you. And if you haven't replicated enough, then we say, then let's definitely watch this process and experiment with it and gather all the data and see how you do, because you may not be able to know yet just by like purely looking at a graph or a set of strengths on a piece of paper and saying, this is how I have to be. It's always This is the median. This is what we think happens because of personality. And there are always exceptions to the rule. So let's talk about why you might or might not be an exception to that rule. It's the most individualization thing that we do, right? But the issue is, as an intuitive, I naturally question myself. And this is maybe the most important part of these videos or of the book that I'm writing with Susan, is when you are intuitive, you are likely to question yourself all the time and not trust yourself, not trust your intuition because you can't prove it. And because we live in this extremely post-enlightenment, deconstructed rationalist society in the West, like generally speaking, the I can't prove it feels like such a detriment. And so we're constantly questioning ourselves because we don't speak with the authority that people speak with when they feel very certain about something. And this is not a gender thing. This is absolutely about the level of intuition and the intuitive decision making that you have versus not. Versus being explicit and concrete. And I hesitate to say logical, like intuition isn't logical, but that's the word that I think that people who think this way would, that's the word that they would essentially use to describe themselves, because it's easy to follow the logic. So intuition and intuitive people can be internally logical 100%. More often than not, it makes complete sense when you're able to walk through all the steps. The problem is, I know before I can walk through all the steps if I'm intuitive. And if I'm not, if I'm less intuitive or not intuitive, I don't know before I can walk through all the steps. And so we inherently tend to not trust each other's decision-making processes in those ways. And I really should say, the less intuitive people question the intuitive people's decision making process because it sounds so antithetical to the way that they work. But the key is, intuition is based on an extremely fast gathering of data that we are unconsciously processing and drawing conclusions from. We are not aware of these things, they are not conscious, and so we don't trust them. So instinctively, we believe that when we hear someone being certain, we instinctively believe that also means they are correct. And I just want us to start questioning the premise of that assumption. If that's the only thing that we do, because we're learning about our intuition and how intuition functions, I will be happy with that. So next time you hear a TikTok video of someone telling you that it takes 5 years to recover from burnout, I want you to just question the premise, not because it can't take 5 years, not because that particular coach is incorrect about it having taken 5 years for her or for some of her clients. What she's incorrect about is that it takes 5 years for literally everyone. Because anytime someone does experimentation or they're trying to prove a theory, they always ignore the outliers, or the outliers don't come to them. In every experiment ever, the outliers just get ignored. And I know we talk about this quite a bit on this particular platform a lot. We say the outliers are important because when they get ignored, they often think they're not statistically relevant or they're not representative of anything. But those people also struggle with that same problem. They also have that issue and they need a fix for that thing. So again, this is not to say anything about burnout one way or the other, but it is to say, having coached literally so many people through burnout in the last 15 years of my life, and additionally having gone through it multiple times myself, I can promise you that that is not true for everyone. It is true for some people. And if it's true for you and you were surprised that you're not over it yet because you should be over it already, then excellent, you get helped by that. So glad. But what I'm frustrated by is that an immediate assumption that we never question the premise of whether or not someone's certainty is directly relevant to their correctness. So I just want us to do that for a while, to just be conscious. How quickly am I believing someone because they sound very certain about something? That is really the question that I just want us to ask, because if my intuition was different than what they're telling me, I'm likely to question myself instead of to question the premise of whatever it is that they're saying, and to assume that it's not right for me, even if it was right for them or right for someone else. So that's all I'm going to say about this topic today. We'll talk about it more in the book, a lot more in the book. You can pre-order the book now if you want to. We'll put the link at the show notes. But I hope that this video was helpful, and I will see you next time on the QuitCast, where we're going to talk more about intuitive writers. All right, bye everybody.